The Gestapo never discovered that a doctor was hiding Jews in a hospital basement. Dr. Aron intro, March 15, 1943. 11:47 p.m. Municipal Hospital of Lwów, occupied Poland. Hauptsturmführer Klaus Becker came down the hospital stairs with 6 Gestapo agents, their boots cracking against the concrete. They'd received an anonymous report. Dr. Aron, the chief surgeon, was diverting medical supplies. A routine investigation. Boring, predictable. Becker had carried out hundreds of inspections like this. He always found the same things: weak-willed doctors skimming morphine, nurses hiding extra food, administrators cooking inventory records. Small corruption, minor arrests, nothing worth remembering. He moved through the main basement corridor, where medical supplies sat stacked on metal shelves. His trained eyes scanned for the obvious giveaways. Mislabeled crates, numbers that didn't add up, suspiciously empty spaces. "Check the supply logs for the last month," he ordered, in German. "Look for discrepancies in morphine, bandages, anesthetics." What Becker didn't know, what no Nazi official in Lwów had discovered, was that less than 8 meters from where he stood, behind a false wall of medical storage, there was a clandestine operating room. And in that room, at that very moment, Dr. Aron was performing emergency surgery on a 7-year-old Jewish girl with acute appendicitis, using stolen instruments and anesthesia that had been systematically diverted for 18 months. That secret operating room was only a small part of a larger system that, by March 1943, had already provided emergency medical treatment to more than 600 Jews from the Lwów ghetto. People who officially didn't exist, who according to Nazi records were already dead or deported. It wasn't run by some massive resistance organization, but by a 38-year-old surgeon who had decided the Hippocratic Oath had no exceptions for inconvenient patients, even when treating them meant violating every Nazi occupation law and risking not only his own life, but the lives of every doctor, nurse, and patient in the hospital. Over the next 3 hours, the Gestapo would comb through the hospital's supply records, interrogate staff, inspect every storeroom. But they would never find the operating room. They would never discover that the medical waste they were hunting was being used to save the lives the Nazis had already sentenced to death. This is the story of how a Polish surgeon turned a hospital basement into the most effective underground healthcare system of the Holocaust. How a 12-square-meter operating room beat the Nazi machinery of genocide. And how secret medicine proved stronger than organized terror. Would you risk your life and the lives of everyone around you to save people your government has declared don't deserve to live? Leave your answer in the comments. Part 1. The Doctor Before the War. The Municipal Hospital of Abajszu, Lwów, built in 1898, was an imposing 4-story structure that dominated the corner of Piekarska and Rapoporta streets. Its red brick walls and arched windows embodied Austro-Hungarian architecture at its most confident. Back when Lwów was the empire's 3rd largest city, and the hospital was considered one of the most modern in Central Europe. By 1939, the building showed its age. Pipes leaked, the heat worked when it felt like it. The wards were perpetually overcrowded. But the hospital kept its reputation for medical excellence largely because of its surgical team, led by Dr. Aron. Aron was born on August 3, 1904, in Lwów, the son of a Reform rabbi and a schoolteacher. His family was Jewish but secular, fully integrated into the city's multi-ethnic Polish society. Aron spoke Polish, German, Yiddish, and some Ukrainian, reflecting Lwów's linguistic patchwork. In 1922, at 18, he entered the University of Lwów to study medicine, one of the few professions where Polish Jews could reach real prominence without facing systematic discrimination. He stood out immediately. His professors noted his ability to stay absolutely calm under extreme pressure, a trait essential in surgery. He specialized in general surgery under Dr. Ludwik Rüdiger, a Polish pioneer of antiseptic techniques. Bielski absorbed not only technical skill, but Rüdiger's philosophy. The surgeon serves the patient, not his own reputation. The most successful operation is the one no one remembers, because the patient simply lived. In 1929, at 25, Bielski finished his surgical residency and was hired as an assistant surgeon at the municipal hospital. He was unusually young for the position, but his ability was undeniable. He could perform an appendectomy in 12 minutes, suture blood vessels so small other surgeons needed a magnifying glass, and stay in complete control through operations that lasted 8 hours. Patients adored him. Bielski had a rare gift for explaining complex medical procedures in plain language without talking down to people. He visited post-operative patients even when it wasn't medically required, simply to check how they felt. In a profession often defined by emotional distance, Bielski was unusually present. By 1935, at 31, he was promoted to chief surgeon, supervising a team of 6 assistant surgeons and handling the hospital's most complicated operations. His operating theater on the 2nd floor became a center of innovation, where he experimented with techniques he'd read about in German and French medical journals. In 1933, he married Miriam Rosenfeld, a violinist with the Lwów Philharmonic Orchestra. They had 2 children, David in 1934 and Rebecca in 1936. The family lived in a spacious apartment on Legionów Street, a 15-minute walk from the hospital. It was a comfortable, intellectual, culturally rich life. Lwów in the 1930s was a city of cafes, concerts, philosophical debates that ran until dawn. Bielski wasn't particularly religious. He went to synagogue on major holidays more out of family tradition than spiritual conviction. His real faith was medicine, a near-religious belief that scientific knowledge, applied with compassion, could reduce human suffering. A belief that sounded merely professional in the 1930s would become revolutionary in the 1940s. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland from the west. On September 17th, following the secret Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the Soviet Union invaded from the east. Poland was split, divided between 2 totalitarian powers. Lwów fell into the Soviet zone. The Soviet occupation was brutal, but not genocidal. Communists arrested capitalists, anti-Soviet intellectuals, Polish military officers. They nationalized property, collectivized businesses, imposed Marxist ideology. But hospitals kept running. Doctors kept treating patients. Bielski adapted. He attended mandatory political meetings, memorized the correct slogans, avoided comments that could mark him as counter-revolutionary. He kept operating, saving lives, training residents. Medicine offered continuity when everything else was shifting. For 22 months, Lwów existed in a strange limbo, occupied but functioning, oppressed but not destroyed. Bielski operated under the Soviet flag instead of the Polish one, but the surgeries were the same. Everything changed on June 22, 1941. Part 2. The Nazi Invasion and the First Dilemma. At 3:15 a.m. on June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa began. 3 million German soldiers crossed into the Soviet Union in the largest front in the history of the war. Lwów, a strategic city near the border, was an immediate target. The Red Army collapsed, By June 30th, German forces had captured Lwów. The Soviet occupation ended. The Nazi occupation began. The difference was immediate and terrifying. The Soviets occupied territory. The Nazis implemented genocide. In the hard, first days of July 1941, the Einsatzgruppen, Nazi mobile killing squads, arrived in Lwów. They orchestrated what would later be known as the Lwów pogroms, 3 days of massacres during which roughly 4,000 Jews were murdered by German soldiers, Ukrainian auxiliary police, and local collaborators. Bielski watched from the hospital windows as mobs dragged Jewish men from their homes and beat them to death in the street. He saw women raped in public. He saw children shot in front of their parents. The hospital received waves of wounded, Jews beaten, stabbed, mutilated, more than they could treat. And then the order came down. Jewish doctors could not treat non-Jewish patients. Jewish patients had to be treated only by Jewish doctors. The hospital was to be fully segregated. The hospital director, Dr. Piotr Kowalski, a Polish Catholic and Bielski's mentor for years, called Bielski into his office. "Aron," he said, his voice shaking, "you have to understand my position. If I don't follow these orders, they'll shut down the hospital. They'll arrest the entire staff. I have no choice." Bielski looked at his mentor, the man who'd promoted him, attended his wedding, held his children when they were born. "What exactly are you saying, Piotr?" "You're relieved of your duties as chief surgeon. You can keep working, but only treating Jewish patients in the segregated wing they're setting up." "And my current patients? I have 16 people in post-operative recovery. 3 need critical monitoring. They'll be transferred to other surgeons." "Piotr, half those surgeons have no experience with the procedures I performed. The patient in room 7 has a complex intestinal anastomosis that could fail in the next 48 hours. He needs specific observation that only I understand." "I'm sorry, Aron. My hands are tied." Bielski left the office and walked straight to room 7. The patient was John Kowalczyk, a 52-year-old Polish farmer Bielski had operated on 3 days earlier to remove an intestinal obstruction. The surgery had been technically complex, requiring resection and reconnection of intestinal tissue. "Mr. Kowalczyk," Bielski said calmly, "I need to check your surgical site." He examined the incision, palpated the abdomen, checked temperature and blood pressure. Everything looked stable, but the next 48 hours would be critical. If the anastomosis failed, Kowalczyk would develop sepsis and die within days. "How am I looking, doctor?" Kowalczyk asked. "You're progressing well," Bielski lied. "Dr. Kowalski will be supervising your recovery from now on." "The director? Why not you?" "New hospital policies." That night, Bielski couldn't sleep. He lay beside Miriam, staring at the ceiling, calculating probabilities. Without specialized monitoring, Kowalczyk had maybe a 60% chance of surviving. With proper monitoring, 95%. The difference was knowledge only Bielski had. Exactly what to watch for, when to intervene, how to adjust treatment based on subtle signs. At 2:30 a.m., Bielski got up, dressed, and walked to the hospital. The night guards knew him and didn't question his presence. He went up to the second floor, to room 7. Kowalczyk was asleep. Bielski checked his vital signs. Slightly elevated temperature, 37.8 degrees Celsius. Not alarming yet, but it needed attention. He inspected the surgical site. Minimal swelling, but detectable. Another early warning. He adjusted the antibiotic dose, increased IV fluids, and left specific instructions for the night nurses about what to monitor. He came back every night for 6 nights, Kowalczyk never knew. The director never knew. The nurses knew, but they said nothing. A silent conspiracy of medical professionalism against Nazi regulation. Kowalczyk lived. He was discharged on July 15th, fully recovered. Bielski never recorded those nighttime visits. Technically, they were illegal. An okay, Jewish doctor treating an Aryan patient. But for Bielski, the question was never, is it legal? It was, is it medically necessary? That distinction would define him over the next 4 years. Part 3. The ghetto is established on November 8, 1941. The Nazis officially established the Lwów Ghetto. Around 120,000 Jews, more than a third of the city's population, were forced into an area of less than 2 square kilometers in the northern district of Lwów. Conditions were deliberately unlivable. Families of 8 or 10 shared single rooms. There was no adequate running water. Sanitation collapsed almost immediately. Disease spread explosively. Typhus, dysentery, tuberculosis, pneumonia. And there was no medical care. The Nazis forbade Jewish doctors from practicing outside the ghetto. But inside the ghetto, there was no hospital, no medical equipment, no supplies. Sick Jews simply died. Bielski watched this humanitarian catastrophe from his apartment just outside the ghetto boundary. He could see the crowded streets, hear the sounds of suffering, smell the stench of illness and death. In December 1941, a man knocked on his door at 11 p.m. Bielski didn't recognize him at first. The man was gaunt, filthy, desperate. "Dr. Bielski, I'm Samuel Weiss. You operated on my wife 2 years ago. Appendicitis." Bielski remembered him vaguely. "Mr. Weiss, what do you need?" "My son. He's 10. High fever for 4 days. Severe abdominal pain. He's dying. The doctors in the ghetto have nothing. No medicine, no equipment. Please, doctor, please." Bielski knew exactly what he was asking. Illegal medical treatment for a Jew from the ghetto. If they caught him, he would be arrested immediately. His family too, most likely. "Bring him," Bielski said. "Now." Weiss disappeared, then came back 30 minutes later with his son wrapped in blankets. The boy was semi-conscious, his skin burning to the touch. Bielski examined him in the living room, while Miriam held a lamp for light. He palpated the abdomen, severe pain in the lower right quadrant, rigidity, rebound tenderness, fever at 39.5 degrees Celsius, pulse 130, acute appendicitis, probably close to perforation. He needed surgery immediately, or he'd die of sepsis within 24 to 48 hours. "He needs an operation," Bielski said. "Tonight." "Where?" Weiss asked. "Hospitals won't take Jews." Bielski thought fast. He couldn't bring the boy to the municipal hospital. He'd be turned away immediately. He couldn't operate in his apartment. No surgical tools, no anesthesia, no sterile instruments. But he had access to the hospital. He had keys. He knew guard rotations. He knew where supplies were stored. "Wait here," he told Weiss. He went to the hospital through a side entrance near maintenance. It was 12:30 a.m. The building was mostly asleep. Only a skeleton night staff remained on the wards. He went down to the basement storerooms. He found what he needed: surgical instruments, anesthetic, sutures, antibiotics, bandages. He stuffed everything into a medical bag. He returned to his apartment. "Dress him warmly, follow me, and stay absolutely silent." He led Weiss and his son back to the hospital through the side entrance. They went down into the basement. Bielski had identified a rarely used storage area at the far end. Basically, an oversized broom closet with a work table. He wiped down the table and covered it with sterile sheets. He laid the boy down. "Mr. Weiss, You're going to see things that may terrify you. But trust me, if you make noise, we'll be discovered and your son will die. Do you understand? Weiss nodded, eyes wild with fear. Bielski administered ether anesthesia, crude by modern standards, but effective. The boy slipped unconscious within minutes. He operated with limited tools under conditions far from ideal. No surgical assistant, no scrub nurse, just Weiss holding a lamp with shaking hands. Their operating room was a makeshift broom closet with terrible ventilation and freezing temperature. But Bielski's skill was extraordinary. He made the incision, found the inflamed appendix, tied off blood vessels, removed it, checked for contamination, closed in layers. 32 minutes from first cut to final stitch. He needs to stay still for 2 hours while the anesthesia wears off, he explained to Weiss. Then you can leave. I'll give you antibiotics and care instructions. They waited in the cold, dark room. The boy woke gradually, confused but alive. At 4 a.m., Bielski got them out of the hospital. He handed Weiss stolen antibiotics, wound care instructions, and a warning. If anyone asks, he was never here. I never did this. The boy survived. The wound healed without infection. And Weiss talked. Not intentionally, not recklessly. He simply mentioned in the ghetto that Dr. Bielski had saved his son. He told people he trusted, people desperate with sick relatives. A week later, someone else knocked on Bielski's door. Then another. Then 3 more. Each needed medical help they couldn't get. Each had heard that Dr. Bielski could do things. Bielski understood he'd crossed a threshold. He could refuse, say Weiss's surgery had been a one-time thing, too risky to repeat. Or he could make it systematic. If he was going to do this, if he was going to provide illegal medical care to Jews from the ghetto, he had to do it properly. He had to turn desperate midnight operations into something sustainable, something he could repeat without being discovered. He needed a secret hospital. Part 4. Building the secret room. The decision to create a clandestine medical facility meant solving multiple problems at once. A physical space that could be hidden, access to supplies, functional surgical equipment, and most critically, staff willing to risk their lives. In January 1942, Bielski spent 2 weeks studying the municipal hospital basement. He knew the building intimately after 13 years working there, but now he looked at it with different eyes. Not for medical efficiency, but for concealment. The hospital basement was a labyrinth of corridors and storerooms. The original 1898 structure had been modified again and again. Extensions added in 1907, 1923, and 1936. The result was a chaotic floor plan with no clear organizational logic. Bielski identified an area at the southeast end of the basement, originally a coal storage room in 1898. Later converted to general storage when the hospital switched to gas heating in 1923. It measured roughly 6 meters by 4, with a ceiling height of 2.7 meters. The key was its location. It sat at the end of a secondary corridor, past the storerooms in active use. Most hospital staff had no reason to go there. The supplies stored in that section were mostly obsolete or rarely needed. But the existing room wasn't enough. It needed to be completely hidden, not merely out of the way. Through contacts in the Polish resistance, Bielski connected with a structural engineer named Tadeusz Borowski, who had designed hiding places for partisans in Lwów. Borowski visited the hospital disguised as a maintenance inspector. The challenge, Borowski explained after examining the space, is that we can't just build a fake wall. The hospital has architectural plans on file, If someone checks them and the dimensions don't match, it'll raise suspicion. Then what do you suggest? Bielski asked. We build the secret room where, on paper, a room cannot exist. Borowski laid out his idea. He would study the hospital's official architectural plans, look for discrepancies between the plans and the real structure, and then exploit those discrepancies. He spent 3 days going through municipal records, the original 1898 construction drawings, and renovation plans from 1907, 1923, and 1936. He found exactly what he expected. Multiple renovations had created inconsistencies. The 1936 plans showed certain basement rooms with dimensions that didn't match real measurements. Here, he said, pointing to a section of the plan. Officially, this part of the basement is 18 meters long, but when I measured it, it's 22. There are 4 meters of undocumented space. Why? Bielski asked. Probably a measurement error during the 1923 renovation. Someone updated the plans incorrectly, or a structural change that was never officially recorded. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we have 4 meters that don't exist on paper. Borowski's plan was brilliant. Build the secret operating room inside those 4 undocumented meters. If Nazi authorities ever compared the physical structure to the official plans, the measurements would match, because the plans were already wrong. Construction took 6 weeks. Borowski worked alone at night, between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. when the hospital was quietest. Bielski acted as lookout, using his legitimate access to alert him to any unusual activity. Borowski built a false wall with reclaimed bricks that matched the hospital's original structure. The wall included a hidden entrance, a panel that slid horizontally behind a supply shelving unit. To access it, you had to know exactly which section of shelving to move and in what sequence. The resulting secret operating room measured 4 meters long, 3.5 meters wide, 2.7 meters high. Total volume, about 38 cubic meters. It wasn't large, but it was enough. Bielski designed the interior meticulously. An operating table, improvised from a stainless steel table taken from the hospital kitchen, reinforced and adjusted to the proper height. Lighting. 2 surgical lamps stolen from a disused operating room on the 3rd floor, wired into the hospital's electrical system through cables hidden in the basement ceiling. Ventilation. Borowski installed a passive ventilation duct that connected to the hospital's general ventilation system. Not comfortable, but enough to prevent dangerous buildup of anesthetic fumes. Storage. Steel shelves for instruments, supplies, medications. Organized according to a cataloging system only Bielski understood. A washing station. A small sink illegally tapped into the hospital's water pipes. Running water was essential for sterilization. A prep table. An additional surface for preparing patients and arranging instruments before surgery. Total cost, about 1,200 Polish zlotys, roughly $8,000 today, paid through resistance donations. Every zloty represented risk, every donor a potential victim if the Gestapo traced the money. The first real test came on March 8, 1942. Part 5. The first secret surgery. Rachel Goldstein was 32 and 7 months pregnant when she arrived at Bielski's door. Her sister brought her, practically carrying her. Rachel was pale, drenched in sweat, barely conscious. Severe vaginal bleeding, her sister said. It started this morning. It won't stop. Bielski examined her quickly. Placenta previa with active hemorrhage. Without surgical intervention, both mother and baby would die within hours. With an intervention, an emergency cesarean, there was a chance to save them. "I need to operate," Bielski said. "Now." They transported Rachel to the hospital using the method Bielski had developed. The side entrance at 2 a.m., when shift changes created a brief window of reduced oversight. They covered her with a blanket and mentally labeled her incoming medical supplies in case anyone questioned them. It was the first time Bielski used the full secret operating room. He'd performed minor procedures there: suturing wounds, extracting bullets, dental work, but never major surgery. Nurse Zofia Kowalczyk, who had worked with Bielski for 8 years in the main hospital, volunteered to assist in the clandestine surgeries. She was a Polish Catholic with no personal reason to risk her life for Jewish patients, except her belief that medicine has no religion. "Ready?" Bielski asked. "Ready," Zofia said, arranging the instruments. A cesarean demands absolute precision. Bielski had to cut through the abdominal wall and uterus, deliver the baby, remove the placenta, repair the uterus, close the abdominal wall. Each step carried specific risks: hemorrhage, damage to nearby organs, infection. In a normal operating room, he'd have a team of 4: lead surgeon, assistant surgeon, scrub nurse, anesthetist. Here, he had only Zofia. He used local anesthesia with mild sedation. He couldn't risk deep general anesthesia under these conditions. Rachel remained semi-conscious, but controlled. He made the incision. Immediate bleeding, more than expected. "Suction," he ordered. Zofia responded instantly, already anticipating it. He worked quickly but carefully. He opened the uterus, delivered the baby, a girl small but breathing. Zofia handled the newborn while Bielski controlled Rachel's bleeding. The placenta was abnormally adherent, making removal dangerous. Bielski worked with painstaking care, removing placental tissue piece by piece to avoid catastrophic hemorrhage. 53 minutes from first incision to final stitch. Both mother and baby survived. They kept Rachel in the secret recovery area for 3 days. Zofia checked her every 6 hours: vitals, surgical site, milk production. Rachel nursed her daughter in near darkness, hidden in the hospital basement. On the 4th day, stable enough to move, Bielski arranged transport back to the ghetto. Rachel and her daughter vanished into the maze of crowded streets. Bielski never learned what happened to them afterward. They may have survived the war. They may have been deported to extermination camps. Most Jews of the Lwów ghetto died. About 100,000 of the 120,000 were murdered by 1944. But in March 1942, Bielski gave Rachel and her baby a chance to live. Without him, they would have died for certain. Rachel's surgery proved the secret operating room worked, but it also revealed a limitation. The space was too small for prolonged recovery. They needed a system to move patients quickly after surgery. Bielski connected with a network of safe houses in Lwów, apartments and businesses where resistance members hid Jews. He developed a transfer system: surgery at the hospital, initial recovery for 2 or 3 days in the secret room, then movement to a safe house for full recovery. The system depended on precise coordination and covert communication. Bielski used resistance couriers, simple codes, meetings in shifting locations. He never wrote anything down. He memorized everything. By April 1942, he was performing 2 to 3 surgeries a week. By July, 5 to 6. By October, the number had risen to 8 to 10. The procedures varied: appendectomies, cesareans, bullet removal, compound fracture repairs, eye surgery, major dental procedures, anything requiring surgical skill that couldn't be done under the primitive conditions in the ghetto. Each surgery was an act of resistance. Not armed resistance. Bielski never held a weapon. But medical resistance against a genocidal policy that denied health care to people labeled unworthy of living. Part 6. Expanding the network. By the end of 1942, Bielski's operation had grown from a one-man effort into a clandestine medical network with multiple moving parts. Medical staff. In addition to Bielski and Zofia, it now included 3 more doctors. 2 Jews hidden from the ghetto, 1 sympathetic Pole, and 4 nurses. Each person knew only what they needed to know. Compartmentalization that limited the damage if anyone was captured. Medical supplies. Bielski developed a sophisticated system for diverting supplies without raising suspicion. He altered inventory logs, reported slightly inflated waste, lost surgical instruments that were actually hidden in the secret room. The theft was meticulous, spread over time, impossible to trace to any single act. Referral system. Doctors inside the ghetto who couldn't perform complex procedures referred patients to Bielski through resistance channels. A patient with operable cancer, a woman with an ectopic pregnancy, a child with an intestinal obstruction, each arrived at Bielski's door with coded notes from desperate physicians. Transport. A network of drivers moved patients between the ghetto, the secret hospital, and safe houses. They used stolen ambulances, delivery carts with hidden compartments, even hearses where patients pretended to be dead during transport. Funding. The operation cost around 800 zlotys per week. The money came from the Polish resistance, underground Jewish charities, and donations from wealthy individuals who sympathized. Bielski never asked where the money came from. He knew it was better not to know. The risks multiplied with every procedure. Every person involved was a potential point of failure. Every transported patient was a chance of discovery. Every diverted supply was evidence of a crime. But Bielski calculated the odds differently than the Nazis did. The Nazis believed extreme terror, public executions, collective punishment, constant surveillance would crush resistance. They assumed rational people would prioritize self-preservation over helping strangers. What they didn't understand was that for people like Bielski, self-preservation meant something else. Preserving his humanity, his identity as a doctor bound by an oath, required resistance. The alternative, letting patients die when he had the skill to save them, would destroy something essential inside him. It was a calculation the Nazis, with their cynical view of human nature, could never understand. One case shows it perfectly. December 1942, Herr Müller, a mid-ranking Nazi official in the ghetto administration, developed acute appendicitis. He was admitted to the municipal hospital, where Bielski still held an official position as a surgeon, only for non-Jewish patients. The hospital director assigned the surgery to Bielski. He's an important officer. We can't risk complications. Bielski operated on Müller with the same precision he used in the secret room. Perfect appendectomy, no complications. Müller recovered fully in 6 days. Afterward, Zofia confronted him. How can you? That man signs deportation orders. He's probably sent hundreds to their deaths. You could have let him die. You could have made a surgical mistake. Bielski answered calmly, if I'd killed him, I'd have become a murderer. I don't fight his evil by becoming evil. I fight it by remaining a doctor. I saved his life because that's what doctors do. And tonight I'll save 3 more lives in the basement, lives he would want destroyed. That's my resistance. It sounded contradictory. To Bielski, it was perfectly consistent. Keeping his professional integrity under all circumstances gave him the moral strength to keep operating in secret. If he'd compromised his medical principles, even to kill an enemy, he'd have weakened the foundation of why he was risking his life. Not everyone understood that logic. Some in the resistance thought it was naive, but Bielski was unwavering. I don't decide who deserves medical treatment. Illness decides who needs it. Part 7. The near captures Bielski's operation nearly got discovered 3 times. The first time, April 1943. A hospital security guard, Stefan Kroll, noticed unusual basement activity during night shifts. He reported to his supervisor that he'd seen Dr. Bielski entering the basement storage area at 2 a.m. on multiple occasions. The supervisor, who turned out to be a secret resistance sympathizer, confronted Bielski privately. Stefan's asking questions. What should I tell him? Bielski made a bold decision. He invited Stefan to a private meeting. I know you've noticed my night activity. I'm going to trust you with the truth, because I believe you're a decent man. He explained what he was doing. He didn't reveal the exact location of the operating room, but he admitted he was treating Jewish patients from the ghetto. Stefan listened without speaking. Finally, he said, "My sister died in childbirth 2 years ago. Hemorrhage after the baby was born. The village doctor couldn't stop it. She bled to death in 3 hours. If there'd been a surgeon like you..." He stopped, his eyes filling with tears. "I'll keep reporting that you're doing nighttime inventory checks. That's what I'll write in my reports." Stefan became an unintended ally, warning Bielski when inspections were scheduled or when Nazi officials were coming to the hospital. The second time, July 1943. Nazi authorities ordered a complete inventory of all medical supplies in Lwów hospitals, looking for diversion. A team of German auditors arrived with detailed records, planning to verify every item. Bielski got 24 hours warning. He worked through the night, moving supplies from the secret room back into official storerooms and altering records so discrepancies looked like minor administrative errors rather than systematic theft. The auditors found irregularities, around 15% missing of certain supplies. But Bielski had an explanation ready. Deterioration from poor storage, plus use in treating ghetto injuries during epidemics to prevent disease from spreading into the Aryan population. The auditors accepted the explanation with skepticism, but without hard proof of deliberate theft. They reprimanded the hospital director for sloppy administration. Bielski avoided arrest. The third time, March 1944. A Jewish patient Bielski had operated on was captured during a ghetto raid. Under torture, he revealed he'd received surgery in a secret hospital, though he didn't know the exact location or specific names. The Gestapo launched an investigation. They interrogated municipal hospital staff, searched the basement, reviewed medical records for suspicious patterns. The secret operating room wasn't found, but pressure intensified. Bielski halted all surgeries for 6 weeks, waiting for the investigation to cool. It was agonizing. Patients who needed urgent surgery were turned away. Some died waiting. Bielski carried their names in his conscience. In May 1944, when the investigation was apparently shelved without results, Bielski resumed operations. But he was more cautious now, performing only absolutely necessary procedures, refusing cases that could wait. Part 8. The ghetto collapses. On June 19, 1943, Heinrich Himmler ordered the final liquidation of the Lwów ghetto. Over the following weeks, the SS and Ukrainian auxiliary police carried out mass deportations. Around 7,000 Jews were murdered in the ghetto streets. The remaining 20,000 were deported to the Belzec extermination camp, where they were killed in gas chambers. By August 1943, the ghetto no longer officially existed. The few thousand Jews still in Lwów lived in the Janowska forced labor camp or hid across the city. The ghetto's destruction changed Bielski's operation. There was no longer a centralized stream of patients. Instead, they arrived unpredictably. Jews hidden in attics, basements, secret bunkers throughout the city. Transport became more dangerous. Without the ghetto as a defined point of origin, moving patients required more complex coordination through a fragmented network of hiding places. But the surgeries continued. Now they were truly underground, not just hidden from the official hospital, but operating outside any institutional framework. Bielski later estimated that between August 1943 and July 1944, he performed around 180 surgeries in the secret room. The cases grew more desperate. Bullet removal from wounded partisans, treatment of torture injuries in escaped prisoners, reconstructive surgery for women disfigured by sexual violence. One surgery from this period haunted him. April 1944. A 28-year-old woman arrived 8 months pregnant. She'd been raped by German soldiers during a raid on her hiding place. She became pregnant. She survived by moving between hiding spots, her growing belly making concealment harder and harder. Now she was in premature labor. The baby was breech, with a prolapsed umbilical cord. Without an emergency cesarean, both would die. Bielski operated. He delivered the baby, a boy, small but alive. The mother survived. Afterward, holding the newborn, she asked, "What do I do with him? Every time I look at him, I see the men who raped me. How can I love him?" Bielski had no answer. He wasn't a psychologist, just a surgeon. "I did what I could do. I kept you both alive. What you do with that life now is your decision." He never learned what she chose. Mother and baby were moved to a safe house 2 days later. Bielski never saw them again. That surgery forced him to face the limits of what medicine could do. He could repair bodies, but he couldn't repair the psychological trauma of rape. He couldn't reconcile a mother to a child conceived through violence. Still, he kept operating. Because the alternative, letting them both die, was unacceptable. Part 9. Liberation and Legacy. On July 27, 1944, the Red Army liberated Lwów. The Nazi occupation ended after 3 years of terror. Bielski emerged from the hospital basement for the last time. The secret operating room had functioned for 28 months. In that period, he performed roughly 620 surgeries on Jewish patients who otherwise would have received no medical care. Not all survived. Underground medicine has higher mortality rates than normal hospital care. Bielski estimated around 87% of his patients survived surgery and initial recovery. Remarkable given the conditions. But it meant roughly 80 people died despite his efforts. But 540 lived who would otherwise have died. 540 lives saved by a surgeon working in a basement with stolen supplies. 3 days after liberation, the Soviets arrested Bielski. Not because they discovered the clandestine operation. In fact, they never knew it existed. They arrested him because he was an educated doctor, which made him suspect as a potential bourgeois sympathizer. He spent 6 months in a Soviet prison before being released without charge. After the war, Bielski continued working at the municipal hospital, now under Soviet administration. But the city had changed. The pre-war Jewish population of roughly 150,000 had been reduced to fewer than 1,000. Lwów itself was annexed by the Soviet Union and renamed Lviv. In 1957, Bielski emigrated to Israel with his family. His wife Miriam survived by hiding with a Polish Catholic family. His 2 children also survived. In Israel, Bielski worked as a surgeon at Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem until retiring in 1974. He rarely spoke about what he did during the war. When asked, he would say simply, "I did what any doctor would have done." But that wasn't true. Most doctors didn't do what Bielski did. Most complied with Nazi regulations, or looked away, or emigrated if they could, or simply survived without risking their lives. Bielski chose differently. He chose to resist through medicine, saving lives as an act of rebellion against a regime dedicated to destroying them. In 1982, Yad Vashem honored him as righteous among the nations. Though technically, as a Jew, he wasn't eligible. Yad Vashem made an exception, arguing that Bielski repeatedly risked his life in ways that went beyond self-preservation. He died in 1989 at 85. His obituary in Israeli newspapers mentioned his Holocaust work in a single paragraph, focusing mainly on his later surgical career. The secret operating room in the municipal hospital basement remained unknown until 1991, when a researcher studying the hospital's architecture discovered the discrepancy in the blueprints. Exploring the basement, he found the hidden space, still containing the improvised surgical table, rusted instruments, and handwritten records in code that Bielski had left behind. The records were deciphered. They confirmed what survivors had testified to, but historians had doubted. Bielski had run a full underground hospital, performing complex surgery under impossible conditions. Today, the space is part of a small museum dedicated to medical resistance during the Holocaust. Visitors can see the operating table, the improvised lamps, the claustrophobic room where procedures were carried out that saved lives. It's deeply moving. The room is so small, the conditions so primitive, it feels impossible that real surgery, life-saving surgery, could have happened there. But it did. 620 times over, 28 months. Bielski's legacy isn't only the lives he saved. Though those 540 people represent 540 stories, 540 families, thousands of descendants who exist because one surgeon decided the Hippocratic Oath had no exceptions. His legacy is proof that resistance to evil can take forms beyond armed violence, that a scalpel can be a weapon of resistance as effective as a rifle, that saving one life at a time in a secret basement with stolen supplies can be a victory as meaningful as any battlefield triumph. The Nazis built an industrial system of death, backed by the full machinery of the modern state. Against that, Bielski had only his hands, his medical knowledge, and his refusal to accept that some lives weren't worth saving. 620 surgeries, 540 lives saved, one surgeon in a basement. The Gestapo never discovered him. They never suspected. They never understood. And that's why they lost. Because in the end, no matter how much power a totalitarian state has, it cannot completely erase the human ability to choose compassion over compliance, to risk everything for strangers, to believe that every individual life matters. Bielski chose, and 540 people lived because of that choice. That's the lesson of the hospital basement. That's the lesson the Nazis could never learn. Medicine has no borders. Compassion recognizes no decrees. Humanity endures even in the darkest places. And sometimes, a doctor with a scalpel can defeat an empire built on gas chambers. One procedure at a time, one life at a time. In a secret basement no one even suspected existed.